Hello, welcome to the new Paranormal. I'm glad you made it. I'm Professor Joseph Dent. I'm the host of this channel. I think our society is on the brink of a paradigm shift that will upend everything we currently think we understand about reality and our place in the universe. This channel is dedicated to exploring the evidence that supports that theory and to discussing the cultural implications that go along with it. Now, we try and stay grounded in reality here, but I have to warn you that we do sometimes wander off into woo-woo territory, so please don't take anything I say too seriously. Alright, now having said that, let's get started on today's show. Today we're going to look at the ideas of four of the biggest thinkers in science and philosophy: David Chalmers, Anil Seth, Federico Faggin, and Bernardo Kastrup. We're going to see if their ideas might give us some clues about this paradigm shift. Alright, let's get started. Folks, something unusual is happening right now at the various highest levels of the scientific community and in academia. This is not a social media event. It's not being talked about at fringe conferences. This is being talked about in university lecture halls and physics symposiums and recorded academic debates. Very highly respected individuals in both philosophy and science are having an open debate about one of the most important questions humanity has ever asked. Is consciousness produced in the brain, or is it fundamental to reality itself? And we'll talk in a little bit about why this is such a profound question to ask. Today we're going to take a look at the ideas of four of the most influential thinkers in this area: Anil Seth, Federico Faggin, David Chalmers, and Bernardo Kastrup. We're going to take a look at their ideas and see where they agree and where they disagree, and look for any evidence of an upcoming paradigm shift in scientific thinking. For most of modern science, the assumption has been pretty straightforward. The universe is made of matter. Brains are kind of like complex biological machines. And consciousness is just kind of what happens when neurons fire in sufficiently complex pattern. This belief is commonly referred to as materialism, although sometimes you'll hear it referred to as physicalism. One of the greatest proponents of this point of view is a British neuroscientist named Anil Seth. Seth argues that consciousness is not some mysterious substance that floats around outside the brain. It is a biological process, what he sometimes refers to as a controlled hallucination generated by the brain as it predicts and models the world around it. In his framework, the brain is a prediction machine. Perception is your brain's best guess about the environment. Your idea of self is constructed by the brain, and consciousness emerges from complex biological activity. Now, there is strong empirical evidence for this position. Brain damage will induce an altered experience in the individual. Anesthesia can eliminate awareness, and neural stimulation in specific parts of the brain can induce specific experiences or perceptions. For Seth and others who share his point of view, consciousness does not need to be fundamental. It is just what the brain does. But not everyone agrees with him, and this is where the debate begins. In 1995, a philosopher named David Chalmers changed the discussion on this subject forever when he coined the term the hard problem of consciousness, which he distinguishes from the easy problems, such as how attention works, how we make and store memories, how the brain processes information. These are all comparatively easy to the hard problem, which asks a much deeper question. Why does any of this processing feel like something from the inside? Why do we have a subjective experience at all? You can describe every neuron firing in the brain. You can simulate the computational structure, but nowhere in that description will you find the taste of chocolate, the color red, or the feeling of being you. Chalmers doesn't dismiss neuroscience, but he argues that explaining behavior is different than explaining experience. He has argued that consciousness might in some sense be fundamental, not supernatural, not magical, but just basic, like space, time, mass, and according to him, consciousness. He's dedicated a considerable amount of time to considering panpsychism as a serious philosophical option. This is the idea that consciousness in some minimal form is a basic feature of reality, not because it's poetic or elegant, but simply because materialist explanations don't answer all of the questions. Chalmers doesn't dismiss neuroscience, but he argues that explaining behavior is not the same thing as explaining experience. We now move on to someone whose journey is especially interesting. Federico Faggin, who is probably best known as the inventor of the microprocessor. and who spent many decades of his life immersed in one of the most materialist sciences of all, engineering, until one day in 1991 when he had a very profound personal experience which changed his perspective forever. He did a 180-degree turnaround and went from materialist beliefs to claiming that material matter could not possibly produce consciousness. Armed with this new perspective, he proposed that consciousness is primary, that physical reality emerges from conscious entities interacting through quantum information. His theory, which he calls quantum information panpsychism, suggests that conscious agents are primary. Matter arises from informational interactions, and that the universe is not built from particles alone. Faggin is not dismissing physics, he's reinterpreting it. He argues that information requires a knower, that experience cannot possibly arise from unconscious processes. This places him in the consciousness first camp. Bernardo Kastrup goes even further. He's an advocate of analytic idealism. In this model, there is one universal consciousness, and he suggests that what we perceive as the material world is the appearance of mental processes from a particular perspective. He goes on to say that individual minds are not separate substances. They are dissociated aspects of a broader field of consciousness. To a materialist, this sounds radical, but Kastrup argues that it solves the hard problem quite elegantly. Instead of trying to derive mind from matter, he derives matter from mind, and he frequently debates neuroscientists and philosophers in public forums, defending his model using logic and science and no mention of mysticism or magic. Here's where this gets interesting. Despite major disagreements, these thinkers all share some common ground. They all agree that consciousness is not trivial, that current explanations are incomplete, the problem is scientifically legitimate, and that dismissing the question outright is no longer acceptable. Even as a materialist, Anil Seth acknowledges that consciousness is deeply mysterious, and Chalmers very much acknowledges the explanatory power of neuroscience. Federico Faggin, for all his talk about universal love, is still very much grounded in his work as a physicist, and Bernardo Kastrup is seriously engaged in empirical research. This is not a debate between science and mysticism. It's about which scientific framework best fits the data. The real divide comes down to this. Is consciousness something that the universe produces, or is consciousness something that the universe is made of? The materialist says that if you build enough complexity, experience will appear. The consciousness-first school of thought says that experience is already there. Complexity shapes how it expresses itself. This is not trivial. Here's what's at stake. If consciousness is fundamental, telepathy becomes possible, or at the very least plausible. Near-death experiences become acceptable topics for scientific debate. The very nature of identity changes. And if materialism holds ground, artificial intelligence becomes philosophically complicated. Consciousness remains a biological mechanism. Experience ends when the brain ends, and AI could potentially become conscious. These are not abstract debates. These discussions will ultimately shape how our society thinks about life, death, and technology. Okay, we're very close to the end of this discussion, at least for today. Before we wrap things up, I wanted to clarify a few points before we go. Number one, at no point in any part of this discussion, paranormal phenomena or activities have in any way been proven to be real. Point number two, I want to make sure is very clear. We are not endorsing any one of the various theories we discussed today. They all have strengths and weaknesses. I also want to make sure that everyone understands nothing that we said here today was meant to suggest that materialism is dead. It's not even close to dying. I also want to make sure that we haven't left anybody with the impression that we are in any way rejecting neuroscience. We're not. There are very important discoveries being made in neuroscience. I'm very excited about the work that's being done in neuroscience right now. I think we should all be keeping a close eye on it. I think we have a lot to learn from that field. Well, that should do it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope we'll see you at the next one. We have a lot of cool stuff to talk about in the next video. Until then, remember that I love you and stay furious. All power to the people.